The boiled one is Watanabe, or a thought form of Watanabe. Mutsuhiro Watanabe was a guard at the Ofuna camp near Tokyo during World War II, and he was known to the American POWs there as the Bird, and to Douglas MacArthur as one of the most wanted people in Japan. He's an absolutely horrible person. For example, he practiced judo on a patient recovering from appendix surgery, and he mistreated Olympic runner Louis Zamperini really badly, which caused him to hurt his wife accidentally. Watanabe was never arrested, never tried, died of old age in April 2003, and apparently became an insurance salesman somewhere along the way. Classic Japan. In the Dr. Nowhere universe, a few months after Watanabe's death, something starts showing up on the televisions of former POWs. The boiled one appears in their dreams, in their sleep paralysis, on their screens looking really cooked, speaking unaccented English and quoting the Book of Revelation, while describing what sounds an awful lot like an air raid. Japanese text in the footage translates roughly to "Fear of the one and only Watanabe, the Bird." So the obvious read is that this thing is Watanabe himself, finally getting the justice he deserves by whatever afterlife handles cases that are this evil. But besides that theory, there's another one that says the boiled one is actually a tulpa, a thought form built from the collective bad experience of Zamperini and the other surviving POWs, who'd been quietly losing their minds about Watanabe for decades while receiving roughly zero psychological support from a country that preferred to call them heroes and move on. The Christian imagery, the unaccented English, the apocalyptic quoting, all of it is pure Zamperini, which means the boiled one might be the worst kind of monster, the one your brain builds for you, fed by the grief of everyone who survived the same thing until it's finally strong enough to walk out of the television. Felix Kranken got drunk and made a hit list. On May 2nd, 1974, a man named Felix Kranken got drunk, crashed his car, and murked his best friend's 2 children, Ed and Molly Walton, then buried them in a panic instead of telling anyone what happened. At least, that's what this theory speculates. For a while, the excuses held, but Felix was the co-founder of BSI Cyberfun, the company that ran Bond's Burgers, a chain of family restaurants staffed by animatronic mascots, and his best friend, Jack Walton, was starting to put together the math on Felix's drinking problem and the suspicious timing of his kid's disappearance. So Felix did the only reasonable thing a guilty drunk could do, which was reprogram the animatronics. The theory is that he loaded a hit list into Bond the Bunny's tape recorder, Jack first, then the technician Susan, then Charles, then Rosemary, then finally Sophie, and let the animatronic do the dirty work. One by one, the Waltons walked into the back of Bond's Burgers and got what was waiting for them. Jack became Bond, Susan became Banny, Charles became Buzu, and Rosemary became Shah. Sophie survived, mostly because Felix couldn't bring himself to finish the job, and the restaurant got shut down before Bond could update the tape with her name marked complete. In 1978, a BSI technician named Ashley found the tape, plugged it into another animatronic, and got murked by Bond for knowing too much. Though the more grounded read is that Bond's circuits had been oxidizing for 4 years in a dusty warehouse, and Ashley's flashlight scrambled his facial recognition into a false positive on the only command still loaded in memory, which is kill Sophie. Felix drank himself to death before he could be charged, leaving Bond still wandering the woods in 1982, with one last instruction queued up. The alternates are rewriting history. There's a reason the series is called the Mandela Catalogue, and it has nothing to do with the fictional Mandela County. The Mandela effect is the phenomenon where a large group of people remember something incorrectly from their childhood. Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, the Berenstain Bears being spelled with an E, Pikachu having a black tip on his tail that he never actually had. A catalogue is a retroactive listing of events. Put those two together and the name is essentially the record of a collective false memory, which lines up suspiciously well with the in-universe US Department of Temporal Phenomena, because temporal refers to the perception of time as a linear march from past to future, which is itself a culturally specific framework that most of us just treat as the default. The theory goes that the alternates don't experience time the way humans do, which means rewriting history is something they can actually attempt. This is where the Bible cartoons come in. Every Overthrown-style episode where Gabriel is the deceiver and biblical figures get haunted by alternates, none of that actually happened. It's footage the alternates have corrupted to insert themselves into the foundational story of human religion, so that future generations grow up remembering Gabriel as the villain and the alternates as the original cast. The Genesis Apocryphon channel that appeared on the TV in Volume 4 is Dave Lee's collection of those same tapes being slowly restored, which is exactly why Gabriel needed Dave dead in the first place. The remastered version of Volume 1 is the same footage with the alternate inserted glitches removed, showing what was actually on the original tape before the alternates got to it. The reason they target children specifically is the same reason the Mandela effect works best on childhood memories. Kids are still building their model of reality, and you can write whatever you want into the foundation if you get there first. If humanity ever fully accepts the alternate version of history, the alternates become the original tenets of reality, and we become the squatters. The Backrooms is a failed experiment. There's a reason every Backrooms video Kane Pixels has put out is set in the late 80s or early 90s, and it goes deeper than aesthetic preference. In the year 2002 or thereabouts, a research division called Async ran a resonance experiment connected to something called Project KV31, accidentally punched a hole in spacetime, and connected our reality to a null space that had probably been sitting there since before life on Earth. That null space wasn't anything in particular before us humans touched it. After we touched it, it became a corrupted replica of whatever was on the other side of the opening, which happened to be Async's offices and the architectural style of mid-century corporate America. So now, there's an infinite, self-replicating maze of fluorescent-lit hallways and damp yellow carpet stretching forever in every direction, because the moment the connection opened, the space started copying itself endlessly with no off switch. The theory says the entities are downstream of the same problem. In the very first found footage video, the carpet is wet, and damp carpet in enclosed poorly ventilated spaces is the perfect substrate for mold and fungus to grow. In a normal building, that's a maintenance issue. In an infinite anomalous space where time doesn't behave correctly, that same biological process gets infinite years to do its homework, and the mold evolves into a self-aware mycelium network that colonizes the entire dimension and starts pulling in human visitors as raw material. The autopsy report video showed this directly, a fungal tissue wrapping around organs like the brain and heart, preserving them as templates instead of digesting them, because the fungus needs to learn human anatomy in order to build its own copies. The humanoid entities prowling around are defective iterations of the same organism, built from absorbed humans, walking around on residual neural patterns that the mycelium copied off the brains it was preserving. The pitfalls are just geometry glitches, the inevitable bugs in a space that's replicating itself infinitely from corrupted source code. The whole system runs on one rule: copy human things, but get it wrong every time. The obelisk is not what it seems. Grief is the actual monster in this one, and that's not a metaphor. David is a kid whose father died when he was very young, and somewhere between the funeral and the move out of his childhood home, he made a new friend in his bedroom closet. The kind of friend who watches cartoons with him and plays games and doesn't seem to need a name. Years later, David is somewhere between 10 and 12, crawling through a small entryway into an isolated house with no doors and no windows, and the friend in the closet is back. This time, the friend wants something. The theory is that the thing in the house has been David's father the entire time, returning the way the dead are said to return in this world, as fragments left on Earth to watch over the people they loved, which is exactly how the butterfly that drifts into the house is meant to be read. The early childhood version of the father was harmless because a grieving child's need for his dad was uncomplicated. The version chasing David through the house is a parent who has spent years on the other side of death watching his family move on without him, has decided he wants them back and is not particularly interested in whether they want to be back. He's already taken Abby, David's younger sister, who keeps appearing as a caterpillar and inside a crib in a cemetery, placed there because, as the father puts it, she didn't look like he remembered. The house itself is every house David has ever lived in, stacked into a single collapsing structure, a physical monument to the family's shared memories, which is more or less the literal definition of an obelisk. Inside that space, the father is essentially God, opening doors that are too tall for a child, shifting walls, leaving a bleeding cross on the wall as a reminder of who is actually in charge. It ends with David hiding in a closet, exactly the kind of closet his friend used to live in when they were children. Until the bedroom light shuts off, the closet door opens on its own, a different light flicks on from inside it, and a familiar voice asks, "David?" The Singularity is a black hole. Most cosmic horror universes have a single antagonist, but Vita Canis has an entire ecosystem, and the theory worth paying attention to says almost none of it is the actual threat. The Singularity is the real one. In this reading, the Singularity is a slowly expanding black hole, kept growing through some kind of ritual, and the monoliths arranged in their circle around it are the colossal creatures performing the ritual, and they could end humanity anytime they wanted to. They don't, because their entire purpose is to maintain the harmony of whatever is being built at the center of that circle, which is the runway for the arrival of the prince. The rest of the Vita Canis biology is distraction. Crawl, which produces every monstrous form of Vita Canis tissue, is being slowly eaten by humans as a delicacy, and trimmings are harmless creatures that humans have decided to keep as pets because the human instinct to pet anything cute is functionally unbeatable. The actually dangerous ones are mimics, harvesters, and hosts. Mimics are physically superior to humans in every measurable way. Harvesters define a kill zone just by existing in it. And hosts, the worst of the three, infect you with something that makes you willingly walk toward them, fully conscious of what's about to happen and completely incapable of feeling anything about it. All of which exists to keep humanity occupied while the black hole at the center quietly grows toward critical mass, waiting for the prince to show up and walk through the door we didn't know was being built. CEOs sacrifice people to Mount Greylock. Greylock is structured as a case file, a collection of footage and documents put together by an investigator named Jim Melgren about something that happened at Mount Greylock in early 1987. The theory is that Simiodin, the tech company that ordered the construction work on the mountain, knew exactly what was going to happen when they woke up whatever had been dormant in there. The construction crew was the sacrifice along with the town that grew up around the mountain because Bernard Hayes, the man at the top of Simiodin, wanted to be as powerful as God, and the way to get there was to feed the thing in the mountain whatever it asked for in exchange for the power he wanted. Simiodin had been doing thoughtform research for decades by that point, spying on people across the country through electronics provided by something called the NAI, and experimenting on vulnerable people who had unusual mental abilities, including a girl named Tiffany. Working with Tiffany is probably what introduced them to the Tall Man, and the Tall Man is probably what told them about the mountain. It worked. Whatever they offered up at Mount Greylock gave Simiodin enough power to effectively run the country for the next several years, with the surveillance program and the experimentation continuing into at least 1994, which is visible on tape 9, but tapes 1 and 2 show what happened to them in the end. The Tall Man probably betrayed them, or the thing in the mountain stopped accepting their offerings, or both. Whatever it was, everyone at Simiodin was murked, the buildings emptied out, and the US government spent considerable resources making sure nobody put the pieces together. Jim Melgren is the one who eventually did, breaking into the abandoned Simiodin offices, hacking their systems, and stitching the case file together from their own internal records and his own field footage. The Mystery Flesh Pit is Satan's literal body. The Mystery Flesh Pit is a national park built around a hole in the Texas ground that turned out to be the inside of a colossal living organism, and one of the preachers in the area maintained, loudly and unfashionably, that the pit was a tunnel into hell and had been buried for a reason. The theory takes that idea one step further. In this reading, the pit is hell itself, in the sense that it's the physical body of Satan, the fallen angel of Abrahamic mythology, cast into the underworld and sitting underneath North America the entire time. The theory is reasonably tight. Satan is consistently portrayed as a primordial entity older than mankind, which lines up with the flesh pit's macrobacteria and the implied age of the organism. Satan's traditional move is temptation, luring humans into darkness with promises of forbidden knowledge and power, which is exactly the relationship the park develops with its visitors before things go wrong. The wildlife found amalgamated with the pit fits the imagery of the devil corrupting God's creatures, and the abyss of suffering language used to describe the pit's interior reads as a one-to-one mapping onto the Abrahamic concept of hell. Which would mean the corporate fiction of a tourist destination built on top of an unexplained biological anomaly is exactly the kind of front you'd expect to find if the devil was sitting under Texas the entire time, taking out a long lease and waiting for the next round of human curiosity to walk in. If you enjoyed this video, click like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.